Justin. It's Tuesday, December 9th. I'm going to spend the first part of today's video basically responding to your past two videos. Since I never got a chance to respond to Thursday's video because I was doing Treehouse Troop things, I feel like I just need to respond to that one, and then I will also respond to yesterday's video. First, your video on YouTube. And in this video I have two things. One, I agree, I quite love YouTube also. And two, I really wasn't worried about you showing me more creepy videos, Justin. I know that you're going to. And now yesterday's video, which I have a grand total of 3 things to say. One, I've been to North Dakota, so I understand how you're feeling. My condolences. 2, I am also not good at ice skating. I went to a skating rink once and told myself that I would never go to another one again. And so far I've kept that promise. And 3, and a bit more complicated because this is going to be me talking about punishments. Obviously I'm glad that you've decided not to punish me for Friday's video, since it would have been up if YouTube had just let it be. You know, instead of not processing it and then thinking that I was a robot. Oh, YouTube, you're so wonderful, and yet so stupid at times. But as for the general idea of punishments, I don't know. And here's the thing, it's not that I'm against punishments. I think having punishments is a good idea, but I'm not good at coming up with things. I mean, you know how I am with just naming things. I have a stuffed tiger named Jeffrey. So it's not that I don't think the punishments are a good idea, it's just that I don't think I can ever come up with good punishment ideas. So I guess that doesn't really answer the question, but that's all I have right now. On the outside I'm smiling, but on the inside I'm curled up into a fetal position of indecision. Anywho, that's all I wanted to say about your videos, but as the title of the video suggested, we are not going to be focusing just on that. That's right, the time has come for the Tuesday Saga. Tuesday. Tuesday really kicked off this whole idea of days going terribly wrong. And it all started because we didn't have Amy. Now last year we always had Amy for the school performances. But we did end up missing her for the public performances, and of course that is where things went terribly wrong. You know, with the laptop getting locked in her office, and then Zach Robb being sick, and then the whole tornado alarm going off, everything was just a mess. So it's a pretty good bet that when we didn't have Amy for a school performance, things went equally wrong. Now the first thing you may be asking yourself is, Jeffrey, how did you get there if you didn't have Amy? Luckily we were able to have Jim Datchik drive us. I'm also realizing that I honestly have no idea how to pronounce his last name, so it is what it is. So the day started off fun enough. As I mentioned in my last video, you may have noticed that the foot was no longer attached to the trailer. You see, this particular day we ended up having the foot just kind of hanging off of the trailer mechanism that it was attached to. Usually we take it off and throw it in the back, but for whatever reason we were unable to do this. So as we were driving along, we heard this scraping sound. Now remember last year when the trailer kind of came detached and was dragging behind us? This was comparable to that sound. And so when we got out of the van at our location, we found that the foot, instead of hanging down this way, was tilted kind of like that. Bad enough that when we got back to the school we could not detach the trailer because we had no way of making sure that it wouldn't roll away. So that was a fun start. And then we noticed that Griffin forgot part of his costume, so we had to improvise with Abby's hoodie, and then when we went to leave this particular school, we found that the engine had died. So we had a jump start, and finally we were on our way to the next school. Which, due to a miscommunication between people, half of the people who were in charge of the school forgot that we were supposed to be coming. So, yeah. That was fun. We were still able to do the show, though. We got it done, we came back to the school, and that particular Tuesday day was finally over. Next up, Tuesday Part 2, Return of the Tuesday. This day started off weirdly enough with Danny coming into the costume room. Danny is not a person we tend to see during a Treehouse Troop tour, so when he came into the costume room asking where Amy was, we were a bit concerned. And sure enough, we quickly found out that our van was missing. Because it turned out, despite the fact that we always have the van checked out every Tuesday and Thursday, that the forensics team had taken our van. You remember the forensics team, Justin.
Said Charlie.
Apparently they had forgotten that we have the van checked out and decided to take the van without checking to see if it was already checked out by somebody else. Luckily, we were only going to First, which is Church on Worcester, which is really close to the Wolf Center, and luckily Danny was nice enough to allow us to use his truck. So we loaded all of our props and set pieces into this gigantic truck, which had a lot more space than we really needed. And Danny drove a couple of us over to the church, and everybody else kind of split between two cars, and we were able to do the performance and come back, and hopefully Danny reprimanded the forensics team for stealing the van, but I actually have no idea if that happened. Then came Tuesday Part 3, Tuesday Strikes Back. This day also started out fun, because it started with Amy being extremely late. You see, Amy recently moved to Toledo, which means that she has a longer trip to get to the Wolf Center than she did last year. And on this particular morning, she got stuck in traffic. So there was a lot of fun communication going on, seeing if we possibly had to leave early before she got there, so we were talking to Jim about possibly taking us again, and then Amy meeting us there, and all that kind of fun stuff. But ultimately, she did come to the Wolf Center, and we were able to leave with Amy driving us. But it meant that we were running absurdly late. So Diane, our stage manager, was calling the school trying to get them to understand that we're late, but they didn't always pick up, so there was a lot of kind of worrying that maybe they wouldn't realize that we're running really late. But finally they did pick up, and we showed up at the school, and Amy and Diane went inside to check us in. They informed the secretary that we had been running late, and so we may need more time. But when Amy came back out to the van, she said that she wasn't sure if the secretary fully understood that in telling her this, she meant that we needed more time to set up. So there was every possibility that we were still running on schedule and so had to start the show when we had originally said we were going to start the show. Which means that by the time we finally got to where we needed to unload, kids were already supposed to be coming in. Luckily this didn't end up being an issue. They were able to delay the show, and luckily this particular show ran less than an hour, so we did have a bit of leeway. But it led to a lot of scrambling and a lot of stress, and not something that I really ever wanted to repeat again. We then move on to Tuesday Part 4, Tuesday Begins, the prequel. This started with all of us in the costume room, and Amy coming in and in a very calm fashion asking us where Diane was. Now, you know when I say that Amy's calm, that's actually kind of terrifying. Because you've seen what happens when Amy gets upset, and Amy was kind of upset. And we quickly found out why. Mary, the individual who played Sarah Kate in Afternoon of the Elves, was sick. And Sarah Kate is a very important role to Afternoon of the Elves, and we were supposed to perform Afternoon of the Elves at the school, so that obviously wasn't going to happen. But luckily we weren't performing for 7th and 8th graders, so we were able to perform Top Job for the older students. I really don't want to imagine what would have happened if we had had to perform Top Job for 7th and 8th graders, because I don't think it would have gone over too well. And Mary Kate is assistant stage manager for Top Job, which means that she did have some duties backstage. Namely, she had to help Griffin with costume changes because Griffin plays 2 different characters and has a crazy amount of costume changes. But Amy was able to step into that role, so we were able to adjust and able to do our performance. And finally, we have Tuesday Part 5, This Time It's Personal. Or alternately in some European cuts, Tuesday Part 5, This Time It's Thursday. For our final installment of the Tuesday Saga, we ended up having to do the show without Abby. Now, I know the details of that, and you know the details of that, but that's not really something that I need to share to the internet at large. So all that really needs to be known is that Abby was unable to do the show. And this meant that we had to figure out how we can adjust the show so that we can do her parts without her being there. Now, at this point, Mary was back, so she was able to fill in for Abby's role, and Amy just continued to do what Mary normally did backstage. And it's hard to say how we would have made it work if Mary hadn't been back. I guess we could have conceivably had me be the teacher, since Abby's character and my character never actually are on stage at the same time. But I'm glad we didn't have to do that, because that might be a bit confusing. But regardless, we were able to make it work, and we did the performance, and we came back home, and that's that. So that was the Tuesday Saga. It has certainly been an interesting semester for Treehouse Troop. But still, it was a lot of fun, so I can look past that. Sorry that this is a long video. I seem to be doing that a lot recently. I'll try to cut back on the super long videos in the future. But until then, I will see you tomorrow.